Right now, there are about 4 million patients in the United States who are suffering from treatment-resistant depression.
Yeah, that's 4 million people.
Exactly. 4 million people where the standard, pharmacological playbook has just completely failed them.
Right. It's basically useless for them.
And yet, if you look at the medical establishment's best answer, the only currently approved drug specifically for this group is a medication called Spravato.
Which is a nasal spray, yeah.
Right. And Spravato reaches less than 2% of those patients. Less than 2%.
I mean, it's just a colossal failure of the status quo.
It really is.
You've got this literal ocean of unmet medical need, and the infrastructure to actually address it is essentially a leaky faucet.
So today on Talk Tickers, we are taking a deep dive into the company that's trying to completely shatter that dynamic.
And, potentially make a lot of money doing it.
Exactly. We've got the Q1 2026 earnings call transcript from Compass Pathways, ticker symbol CMPS.
Right, so if you're a retail investor listening to this, you're going to want to pay attention.
Definitely. Our mission today is to explore this exact intersection of cutting-edge biotechnology, massive regulatory hurdles, and Wall Street economics.
Because we are looking at how a substance that has historically been super stigmatized,
criminalized even.
Yeah, criminalized, locked up in Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. We're talking about psilocybin.
Right, magic mushrooms, basically.
Exactly, but they are systematically engineering it into a fully commercialized, FDA-approved medical treatment.
They're calling their proprietary synthetic psilocybin formulation COMP360.
And management is projecting blockbuster commercial status by the end of 2026.
Which, on an earnings call, that usually sounds like standard corporate bravado.
Oh, yeah, CEOs say that stuff all the time.
Right, but digging into this transcript, which features their CEO, their chief commercial officer, and their chief patient officer, you see they aren't just crossing their fingers here.
No, they've got a very specific battle plan.
Yeah, they are meticulously attacking the exact friction points that have kept that 98% of patients in the dark.
But, before we can even get into their commercial strategy, we have to start with the clinical reality.
Exactly. Because as an investor, you have to know what they are actually selling.
Right. And the data from their phase 3 program trials, COMP005 and COMP006, it's wild.
The executives on the call kept using the word unprecedented to describe the data.
Which, in biotech, that gets thrown around constantly.
So much. But looking at the scale here, it actually kind of warrants the term, right?
I think so, yeah. They have over 1,000 patients across this pivotal program.
1,000 patients in a psychedelic trial.
Yeah, and specifically the duration of the blinding is what's crazy. They blinded these trials for 26 weeks.
Which, wait, just to clarify for everyone, keeping a psychiatric trial blinded for half a year is a complete logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're dealing with a potent hallucinogen.
Because of the expectancy effect, right?
Exactly. The obvious challenge is that the patient knows when they've received a heavy macro dose of psilocybin versus a sugar pill.
Yeah, you can't exactly hide a 6-hour trip.
Right. So to maintain the integrity of a 26-week blind, you have to utilize active placebos.
Or subperceptual microdoses, I think they mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. You have to ensure that both arms of the trial feel some sort of physiological response.
Got it. So the placebo group feels a little weird, so they aren't sure if they got the real deal.
Right. And you combine that with an identical psychological support wrapper for everyone.
Okay, so the therapy part looks exactly the same for both groups.
Yeah, so the long-term observation of the therapeutic effect isn't heavily biased by the patient just knowing they got the drug.
Okay, that makes sense. And by successfully executing that 26-week blind, Compass is bringing an astronomically robust data set to the FDA.
Which is exactly what you want to see if you're holding the stock.
Right. And the actual efficacy numbers they reported are what's really driving the Wall Street attention right now.
Oh, the numbers are fantastic.
So in the COMP005 trial, they saw a 25% clinically meaningful response from a single administration.
One dose, just one.
One dose. And remember, these are treatment-resistant depression patients.
Right. By definition, they have already tried and failed multiple conventional therapies.
They are the hardest patients to treat. Historically, only 2 medicines have ever been approved and actually utilized for this specific population.
Yeah, this highly refractory group.
So to see a quarter of them achieve a clinically meaningful response from one intervention is a massive signal.
It's huge. But the COMP006 trial data is where the clinical narrative really solidifies for me.
Because of the second dose.
Exactly. When a second fixed dose was added just 3 weeks after that initial administration, the response rate jumped to 40%.
40% from 2 doses.
Yeah, compared to people taking pills every day for years.
Which is so crazy to think about. I mean, the standard of care for depression over the last 40 years has been the SSRI model, right?
Right, trying to maintain this steady state of neurotransmitters through a daily chronic intervention.
It's like trying to click the mouse repeatedly when your computer is completely frozen, just hoping the application eventually responds.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Whereas QMP360 is attempting a hard system reset.
Well, the hard reset analogy is conceptually useful, but structurally it's actually a bit more nuanced than that.
Oh, really? How so?
Because a factory reset implies returning the brain to like a blank slate.
Right.
But what QMP360 and 5-HT2A receptor agonists in general are actually doing is inducing a temporary state of profound neural plasticity.
Okay, neuroplasticity, meaning the brain can change easier.
Exactly. They are disrupting what's called the default mode network.
The default mode network.
Yeah, which are the rigid neural pathways that govern our sense of self and our ruminative thought patterns, those loops of negative thoughts.
Ah, okay. So you aren't resetting the machine.
No, it's more like you are melting the plastic so the patient can mold an entirely new structural shape.
Melting the plastic. I like that. And that mechanism of action dictates the label goal that management is aggressively pursuing with the FDA.
Right. The label is everything in pharma.
It's the rule book for commercialization. Because if the FDA mandates a super rigid dosing schedule, the economics completely change.
Oh, it would ruin the model.
So what exactly is Compass asking the FDA for regarding the prescribing label?
Well, they're targeting a label that specifies 1 or 2 initial doses, followed by episodic dosing strictly at the healthcare provider's discretion.
Episodic dosing, so whenever the doctor thinks they need it?
Exactly, which is a radical departure from the standard pharmacy counter model we're used to.
Right, going in every 30 days for a refill.
Yeah. They found that some patients respond beautifully to the first dose and require absolutely no further intervention for months.
Wow, just one and done for a while.
Right. But then others need that second dose at the 3-week mark to really achieve remission. So the goal is to give clinicians the flexibility to treat the actual patient sitting in front of them without being locked into a rigid quarterly or biannual mandate.
Which makes sense medically. But looking at this as a retail investor, building this entirely new paradigm of episodic care burns an immense amount of capital.
Oh, yeah. Running 1,000-patient blinded phase 3 trials is incredibly expensive.
Definitely. And on these earnings calls, the analysts are always modeling out the cash runway. They want to know when the money runs out.
Right, but the CFO's commentary on the balance sheet here was really definitive.
Yeah, they've got the cash on hand to carry them well past their projected launch date and into 2028.
Which is just a massive relief. It removes that immediate dilution risk for investors.
Exactly. As an investor, you don't want them doing a defensive capital raise right in the middle of their NDA submission, right?
No, that would tank the stock. But here, they have complete operational security.
Okay, so they have the capital and they have the clinical data.
Yeah, the setup is strong.
But, let's look at the story behind the numbers, because tomorrow morning, this is still a Schedule I narcotic.
Right. The legal hurdle is massive.
Getting the federal government to actually allow it to be sold is the immediate obstacle.
Yeah.
But Compass got a huge regulatory tailwind this quarter with the award of a commissioner's national priority voucher, the CNPV.
Which is a golden ticket, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we see priority review vouchers occasionally in rare pediatric diseases, but how is this specific voucher altering their timeline?
Well, a CNPV fundamentally alters the bureaucratic math for the FDA.
How so?
So a standard new drug application in NDA usually subjects a company to a 10 to 12-month review cycle.
Right, and it's notoriously opaque.
Very. You submit the giant binder of data and you just wait.
Okay.
But the CNPV triggers the potential for an ultra-accelerated review timeline of just 1 to 2 months after the final NDA submission.
1 to 2 months. That is warp speed for the FDA.
It really is.
Yeah, but I want to scrutinize the timing here because I know the analyst Madison zeroed in on this exact point during the Q&A.
Yeah, she caught that.
The clock for that 1 to 2 month review doesn't start the day the voucher is awarded, right?
No, it does not. And that's a key detail for investors to track.
Okay, so when does it start?
So Compass is utilizing a rolling submission process.
Meaning they submit pieces as they finish them.
Exactly. They are submitting the safety, manufacturing, and preclinical modules of the NDA sequentially.
Oh.
The accelerated clock only begins ticking once the final module is submitted.
Right. And what's the final module?
The final piece of that puzzle is the 26-week Part B data from the COMP006 trial.
And management guided for that data to drop in early Q3, right?
Yes. So early Q3 is the critical catalyst date for anyone holding CMPS.
Okay, so the official countdown starts in Q3. But the CEO made a fascinating point on the call that the real value of the CMPV isn't just the official timeline at the end.
No, it actually changes the entire nature of their relationship with the FDA right now.
Right. Because it forces a highly collaborative, real-time working environment with the FDA's psychiatry division.
Exactly. The standard bureaucratic friction is just eliminated.
Like waiting 30 days for a meeting request to be approved.
Or waiting weeks for written feedback on a single trial protocol. That's all gone. They are scrubbing data and resolving anomalies hand in hand with the regulators right now.
Which is great for the FDA side of the equation.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have to talk about the DEA.
The elephant in the room.
Psilocybin is Schedule 1. It shares the same legal classification as heroin, meaning the federal government currently recognizes absolutely no medical value.
None. Zero.
So the FDA can approve COMP360 all day long, but doctors cannot legally prescribe it until the Drug Enforcement Administration reschedules it.
Right. And historically, the DEA moves at a completely glacial pace.
So how are they handling that?
Well, this is where Compass demonstrated a remarkable level of strategic foresight.
Yeah.
They recognized the dual sovereignty issue of drug scheduling in the United States very early on.
Dual sovereignty, meaning the states versus the feds.
Exactly. Because even if the federal DEA reschedules a substance to Schedule 2 or 3, individual state pharmacy boards and legislatures maintain their own controlled substance lists.
Oh, wow. So if you don't prep the state level, you end up with a totally fragmented rollout.
Exactly. It might be federally legal, but a doctor in, say, Ohio or Texas could still lose their medical license or face state prosecution.
Man, a state-by-state commercial rollout would be a logistical nightmare.
And a massive drag on revenue velocity, which Wall Street would hate.
So what did Compass do?
For the past 2 years, they've been executing a quiet but very aggressive lobbying campaign at the state legislature level.
Really? Just behind the scenes?
Yeah, they've been working to pass automatic alignment statutes or trigger laws.
Trigger laws, meaning they trigger automatically.
Right. Because of this groundwork, almost 90% of the U.S. population now lives in a state that is legally bound to automatically follow the federal rescheduling decision within 30 days.
90%?
Yeah.
They basically pre-wired the entire country.
Yeah. The moment the federal switch flips, the state laws instantly sync up.
That is incredible risk mitigation for an investor.
It really is.
But what about the federal DEA timeline itself? Because by statute, the DEA has 90 days after FDA approval to issue their rescheduling decision.
Right.
90 days of dead air post-approval is an eternity for a commercial launch.
It is, but the macro political environment is actually providing a bit of a tailwind here.
Oh, with the White House?
Yeah, there's a recent White House executive order prioritizing mental health infrastructure.
Okay.
And it explicitly recognizes the urgency of moving approved psychiatric treatments through the regulatory pipeline.
So Compass can use that?
Exactly. They're leveraging this directive to engage the DEA aggressively right now. They're providing their 8-factor analysis early, aiming to have the DEA rescheduling happen almost concurrently with the FDA approval.
Wow, so no 90-day waiting period.
That's the goal. They want to skip that statutory clock entirely.
Okay, I see the strategy. But, the analyst Andrew brought up a massive variable during the call regarding an FDA advisory committee, or AdCom.
Oh, yeah, the AdCom question is huge.
Because we saw a competitor in the psychedelic space, Lykos Therapeutics, with their MDMA for PTSD application. They got absolutely excoriated in their AdCom.
Oh, it was a bloodbath. The independent panel just tore into their trial design and their blinding methodologies.
Right. But the CEO of Compass projected a lot of confidence that they might not even need an AdCom.
Which is a bold claim.
Yeah. Is that realistic, or is it just corporate spin to appease Wall Street? Because given the Schedule 1 status, isn't the FDA almost guaranteed to want external cover?
It's a vital question, and the CEO's response was calibrated very, very carefully.
What did he say?
He acknowledged that convening an AdCom is entirely the FDA's prerogative, and that decision won't be finalized until the regulators see the totality of the NDA data.
Right, standard safe harbor stuff.
Exactly. And Compass is breaking the internal architecture to defend their data in an AdCom if necessary. However,
here's the but.
Right. The confidence you noted stems directly back to that CNPV voucher we talked about.
Because they are already having the difficult conversations in real time.
Precisely. AdComs are usually utilized when the FDA internal review team is divided or when they identify some significant data anomaly they want external experts to adjudicate.
Okay.
But if Compass and the FDA's psychiatry division are collaborating continuously through this rolling submission,
ironing out safety and efficacy questions before the final modules is even submitted.
Exactly. If they are doing that, the internal need for an AdCom diminishes significantly. If the data is as robust as the Phase 3 top line suggests, the FDA might feel secure enough to just approve it without the external theater.
Without the circus.
Right.
Okay, so let's assume they run the gauntlet flawlessly.
Best case scenario.
Right. The FDA approves it, the DEA reschedules it concurrently, and the state trigger laws activate. Compass wakes up the next morning with a fully legal, commercializable molecule.
Great.
But legal does not mean profitable.
Not at all.
The next morning, they have to convince insurance companies to actually pay for it, and they have to convince clinics to administer it.
And this is the absolute crux of the earnings call for retail investors.
Yes.
The business model. Because without a viable economic model for the private practice clinics, the drug just stays sitting in the warehouse.
Right. So what's their plan?
Well, Compass is not attempting to build a bespoke clinic network from scratch. That would be way too capital intensive.
Okay, so they're piggybacking.
Exactly. They are explicitly targeting a commercial blueprint that already exists.
The infrastructure built for Spravato, Johnson & Johnson's nasal spray.
Yes. There are currently about 7,500 interventional psychiatry centers across the United States administering Spravato right now.
7,500 clinics, that's a solid footprint.
It is. And these facilities already possess the physical requirements, the quiet rooms, the specialized seating, and the staffing models necessary to supervise patients undergoing altered states of consciousness.
Now, one of the analysts asked a really crucial question regarding the composition of these clinics. Because when you think of a novel 6-hour psychedelic therapy, the instinct is to assume it will be rolled out at like major academic research hospitals.
Right. You think Stanford, Johns Hopkins, Mass General.
Exactly. But the chief patient officer, Dr. Steve Levine, immediately corrected that assumption on the call.
Yeah, that was a surprising statistic. He noted that less than 5% of Spravato patients are treated at major academic medical centers.
Less than 5%.
I know. The academic centers are essential for the foundational research and the initial clinical trials, but they are fundamentally not designed for high-throughput, high-volume psychiatric care.
Too much bureaucracy, probably.
Exactly. They're constrained by institutional red tape. The real engines of this market are the private, often private equity-backed, interventional psychiatry clinics.
Because they're agile.
Right. They understand the reimbursement mechanics, and they actually have the capacity to treat the masses.
Okay, but if you are targeting private clinic owners, you have to prove the unit economics work.
You have to show them the money.
Exactly. And the analyst Judah forced management to break down the exact math of a single clinic room, and the resulting comparison is just stark.
Oh, the $900 question. Let's break it down.
Yeah, let's look at a typical clinic room today administering Spravato.
So Dr. Levine laid out the daily capacity. Operating at standard efficiency, a clinic can cycle 3 Spravato patients through a single treatment room in 1 day.
Okay, 3 patients.
And the average reimbursement a clinic captures for the time, space, and monitoring of that Spravato administration is roughly $300 per patient.
Got it. So 3 patients at $300 each. That specific room generates $900 a day.
Right.
And that $900 has to cover the rent, the electricity, the malpractice insurance, and the nurse's salary.
Yep, that is their baseline economic hurdle just to keep the lights on.
Okay, now introduce CecoMP 360 into that exact same room. A psilocybin session requires approximately 6 hours of observation time.
Which is a massive operational shift.
Massive.
Yeah.
You're taking a room that generates $900 a day, turning over 3 patients, and you are dedicating it to a single patient for almost the entire workday.
Right.
If I am a clinic owner, my immediate reaction is that I am going to lose money.
Of course.
I cannot afford to shut down a high turnover room for 6 hours unless the reimbursement for that single patient dramatically exceeds $900.
And this is where Compass executed a masterstroke of commercial strategy years in advance of this earnings call.
Okay, what did they do?
The molecule is only half the product. The billing code is the other half.
The CPT codes.
Exactly. Compass aggressively lobbied for and successfully secured psychedelic-specific CPT-3 codes.
CPT codes, current procedural terminology.
Right. Without a specific CPT code, an insurance company simply rejects the claim because they have no structural mechanism to categorize or pay for the procedure.
Okay, so they have the codes, but how does that solve the $900 problem?
Because the CPT-3 codes Compass secured are engineered specifically to account for continuous in-person monitoring during a psychedelic therapy session.
Okay.
And the critical mechanism of these codes is that they are billable by the hour.
Billable by the hour. They aren't a flat procedural fee.
Exactly. The clinic turns the meter on for all 6 hours.
Wow. So it reimburses the clinic for the intensive clinical work and the heavy practice expenses incurred over that massive multi-hour block.
Yes. And Dr. Levine pointed out that because a standard clinic day might stretch to 8 or 9 hours, a clinic could theoretically dedicate a room to a key EP360 patient for the first 6 hours.
Fully bill those CPT-3 codes.
Right. And still have time to turn the room over for a Spravato patient in the late afternoon.
Creating a stacked, highly lucrative revenue model for the clinic.
Exactly. It's a game changer for the unit economics.
But, and there's always a but, on Wall Street, those CPT-3 codes are currently just temporary tracking codes.
Yes, they are.
The analyst Ritu drilled into the next major hurdle during the call, the AMA's RUC committee.
Oh, the RUC. Yeah, this is incredibly political.
Right. The RUC, the Relative Value Scale Update Committee, dictates the actual dollar value assigned to these codes for Medicare, which commercial insurers then baseline against.
And it is a fiercely guarded ecosystem.
Why is it so guarded?
While the RUC evaluates medical procedures and assigns them RVUs, relative value units, the problem historically is that the RUC has been heavily dominated by surgeons and interventional specialists.
People who perform discrete, highly technical physical procedures.
Exactly. A surgeon evaluates a 6-hour block of time and calculates how many knee replacements or appendectomies they could perform.
Right. They view value purely through the lens of physical intervention.
Yeah. But now you have the psychiatric lobby coming to that exact same committee, asking them to assign a massive RVU value to a practitioner sitting quietly in a dimly lit room, simply monitoring a patient's internal introspective journey for 6 hours.
The culture clash is immense.
It requires an intense paradigm shift for the committee. So Compass is deploying very experienced reimbursement consultants to navigate the RUC.
Because they have to articulate that the RVU value isn't just about physical action.
Right. It's about the intense liability, the specialized training, and the acute clinical judgment required to safely manage a patient through an altered state of consciousness.
Because if they don't get these temporary codes upgraded to Category 1 status with a high enough valuation, private clinics won't be profitable.
And the entire commercial strategy collapses.
Right. And speaking of that liability and staffing, that brings us to the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy.
Which is another massive piece of the economic puzzle.
The FDA mandates a REMS for medications with serious safety profiles. The central question for clinic profitability here is, who does the FDA legally require to be in the room for those 6 hours?
Right, because if the FDA mandates that a board-certified psychiatrist must sit in the room holding the patient's hand for the entire session, the economics are instantly destroyed.
You cannot bill insurance enough to cover 6 hours of a psychiatrist's hourly rate.
No way. It would be thousands of dollars.
Which is why the analysts were pushing Dr. Levine for clarity on the expected verbiage of the REMS.
And his guidance was actually extremely reassuring for the financial models.
What's the expectation?
He anticipates a REMS structure very similar to what already exists for Spravato and similar to the framework the FDA initially proposed for Lykos's MDMA.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
The expected mandate will require a prescriber available and a licensed healthcare provider on site.
Okay, so prescriber available simply means the psychiatrist is in the building.
Right, perhaps down the hall in their office, managing their standard patient load and generating separate revenue.
They just have to be available for acute escalation if necessary.
Correct. But the licensed healthcare provider on site, who is actually sitting in the room continuously monitoring the patient, does not need to be the physician.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, it could be a nurse practitioner, a physician assistant, or an appropriately licensed psychotherapist.
That brings the labor cost down significantly.
Exactly. Dr. Levine emphasized that the REMS will establish the safety perimeter, but it will not dictate the granular practice of medicine. It leaves the specific cost-effective staffing ratios to the clinic's operational discretion.
Man, they are building an incredibly sophisticated commercial machine.
They really are.
They have the state trigger laws ready, the hourly CPT codes established, and a REMS model that actually protects clinic profitability.
It's a very solid setup.
But what becomes truly fascinating in this earnings transcript is that while they are preparing this massive launch for treatment-resistant depression by the end of 2026, they are simultaneously laying the tracks to attack an entirely different patient population.
Arguably a much more desperate patient population.
Yeah. They're looking at the landscape for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
And the reality of PTSD treatment in America is just utterly grim right now.
As the CEO highlighted, there has not been a single novel pharmacological treatment approved for PTSD in this century.
Over 20 years without a new drug.
The current standard of care relies on 2 generic SSRIs, which offer only modest, often completely inadequate symptomatic relief.
And we are looking at an affected population of 13 million American adults.
13 million. It is a staggering public health crisis.
And it's not just a corporate target, it's a huge federal priority right now.
Right. The earnings call detailed how the recent White House executive order focusing on mental health infrastructure is rapidly accelerating the conversation.
Particularly regarding veterans.
Because the Department of Veterans Affairs is bearing the absolute brunt of this failure in the standard of care. So how is Compass actively integrating with the VA?
They're not merely having high-level policy discussions. They are deeply embedded in the operational groundwork.
What are they actually doing?
Compass is supplying the COMP360 drug and executing the specialized training protocols for the initial cohort of clinicians who will run major multi-site VA studies.
Okay, so getting the drug into the system early.
Right. Dr. Levine noted that the VA has an integrated project team that has been working for years to prep their physical and bureaucratic infrastructure.
So they're ready to go.
Yeah, they are building the capacity to implement psychedelic interventions the absolute moment they receive FDA approval.
But, the mechanics of treating PTSD with a psychedelic require intense scrutiny. Because earlier we discussed MDMA.
Right, Lykos drug.
MDMA is a pathogenic drug. Its therapeutic mechanism relies on suppressing the amygdala's fear response while simultaneously elevating oxytocin and dopamine.
Right.
This allows the patient, alongside a psychotherapist, to actively recall and verbally process the traumatic memory without the paralyzing fear.
They literally have to walk back through the fire to put it out.
Exactly. It is an incredibly grueling therapeutic process.
Because confronting the trauma directly is deeply distressing, and it's a primary reason why attrition rates in traditional exposure therapy and even pathogenic drug trials can be really high.
Yeah, patients simply cannot endure the pain of the recall.
But Dr. Levine synthesized a really profound insight regarding their phase 2 PTSD trials with psilocybin.
Right, because the mechanism of action is entirely different.
Yeah. In post-treatment interviews, the patients consistently reported that the COMP360 treatment was not just tolerable, but often highly acceptable and pleasant.
A pleasant treatment for severe PTSD seems like a total oxymoron. Why is it different?
It's because of how psilocybin interacts with the overarching neural networks.
Okay.
Patients reported that the specific traumatic event, the core memory causing the disorder, often did not even surface during the acute 6-hour psychedelic session.
Wait, really? It didn't even come up?
Didn't come up. They did not have to confront the monster in the closet.
Wow.
The psilocybin induced that state of hyperplasticity, allowing the brain to fundamentally restructure its emotional processing architecture.
So the brain fixes itself without explicitly focusing on the trauma.
Exactly. And despite never actively engaging with the declarative memory of the trauma during the trip, these patients experienced profound, durable improvements in their PTSD symptoms in the weeks following a session.
Think about the implications of that. If the barrier to entry for PTSD treatment is no longer, you must come into this room and relive the worst day of your life.
Which is terrifying for people.
Right. But instead, it's you will undergo a profound, potentially pleasant restructuring of your neural pathways without forced trauma recall that fundamentally alters the societal willingness to seek psychiatric help.
It drastically lowers the barrier to entry for the most vulnerable populations.
It removes the terror from the treatment.
And economically, think about it. Because Compass is already building the infrastructure. The 7,500 clinics, the hourly CPT-3 codes, the flexible REMS protocols for the initial TRD rollout, adding a PTSD indication to the label later will be incredibly synergistic.
Right, the commercial machine will already be humming. They will just be feeding a massive new patient population into an optimized engine.
Exactly. So to wrap this up, if you are looking at the bottom line for CMPS, we have unpacked what is essentially a masterclass in biotechnology commercialization today.
Definitely.
We started by looking at a totally broken system, 4 million TRD patients with effectively zero viable options.
And we've seen how Compass Pathways is leveraging unprecedented 26-week blinded trial data to prove an episodic hard reset mechanism of action.
We examined the regulatory strategy, utilizing that CNPV voucher to force real-time collaboration with the FDA and outflanking the DEA by pre-wiring state automatic alignment laws across 90% of the country.
Right, and we dissected the granular room-by-room economics required to make this a reality for retail clinics.
Transitioning from the high-turnover Spravato model to the fine dining 6-hour CMP 360 model.
Entirely supported by the critical acquisition of hourly CPT-3 codes and a flexible REMS protocol. All while actively integrating with the VA to address the massive underserved population of 13 million adults suffering from PTSD.
It is a comprehensive, multi-front campaign to overhaul the psychiatric status quo.
It is. But I want to leave you with a final thought, a provocation that builds on the clinical mechanisms we've discussed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Compass Pathways succeeds, they are not just introducing a new drug. They are transitioning the fundamental paradigm of mental health care from a chronic daily medication model to an episodic interventional model.
It is the shift from daily maintenance to acute intervention.
Exactly. If we reach a point where we no longer have to take a pill every single morning to manage our neurochemistry, if depression and trauma become conditions we treat acutely, similar to like setting a broken bone or removing an inflamed appendix, rather than chronic identities we manage daily, how will that fundamentally alter society's understanding of what it actually means to be cured of a mental illness?
Wow. Yeah, it challenges the very definition of psychiatric illness in modern society.
Right. If the daily physical reminder of the illness, the pill bottle on the nightstand, is gone, does the psychological weight of the diagnosis vanish with it?
That's a huge shift in perspective.
We transition from being people with depression to people who required an intervention. We fix the foundational structure of the dam rather than handing out tiny buckets to bail the water every morning.
A completely new way to look at mental health.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this Talk Ticker's deep dive into the Q1 2026 earnings call of Compass Pathways. We hope we've provided the analytical tools to look past the top-line press releases and understand the intricate, granular mechanics of how a true medical revolution is regulated, billed, and ultimately delivered to the patient. Keep questioning the mechanics of the information around you, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.